For more on this story, we're joined by Economist Laurie Laird. Laurie, thanks for joining us. Are you surprised that India has done this, and will it have an overall impact on its economy, do you think?
I'm not terribly surprised. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has talked about sort of streamlining the GST, the goods and services tax. And a lot of people, a lot of outsiders and insiders think that the establishment of this GST is one of his greatest accomplishments in office. It replaced, 8 years ago, it replaced the whole series of state-by-state taxes. It made doing business across state lines in India very, very difficult. So the introduction of this tax was hailed across the world. There were 4 tranches, 4 different tax bands. He has now cut that to 2. Now, he has been talking about that for a while, but the extent to which the things that are going into the lower tax band is a little bit surprising. And it does feel like an attempt to get the Indian consumer spending and perhaps replace some of the activity that's lost to those Trumps applied by Donald Trump.
Let's look at the bigger picture here. Can India really retaliate against Trump's 50% tariffs, or is that impossible?
I mean, there are certain things India can do. I think that countries that have attempted to retaliate against the U.S. by imposing or putting tariffs on U.S. goods have not lived to tell the tale, right? They have been punished greatly. And Donald Trump and his team have said, well, okay, we're going to give some, this country or that country a break because they haven't retaliated. So I don't think India will go down that way. Certainly hasn't been any discussion of doing that. India is not a huge trading economy anyway. And that's one reason why these tariffs are probably not going to hurt the Indian economy that much. About 60% of Indian GDP comes from consumption, which is much, much higher than most developing economies. What India could do, though, is make it a lot harder for U.S. companies to set up in India. And it's already pretty difficult. But with India being the most populous country in the world and having a growing middle class, a lot of U.S., particularly consumer goods companies, are salivating about the prospects of setting up in India. India has a record of sort of changing the tax laws retroactively on a number of companies. Vodafone, for one, the UK telecoms company, got really caught up in a changing tax law, ended up going to court and having to pay a lot of back taxes that they didn't expect. That's the sort of thing that India could do to frustrate the U.S., to make it much more difficult for big U.S. companies to set up shop there.
Laurie, let's stay with Trump's tariffs for a moment, if we may. The president has asked the Supreme Council to save his emergency tariffs. How do you think and how do you envisage that playing out?
Yeah, this is an interesting story. It's not entirely unexpected, right? Donald Trump loves his litigation. And this follows a ruling last week that an appeals court said that that Donald Trump overstepped his powers by declaring an economic emergency to impose these tariffs. And, there is a little bit of cognitive dissonance going on here. We've heard Donald Trump on many occasions say the U.S. is the hottest economy in the world, right? So it's sort of difficult to square that with the fact that America is facing an economic emergency because of its trade deficit. So those two things can't really be true at the same time, can they? I don't think that this will get in the way of imposing these tariffs or extending these tariffs. I think Donald Trump will probably just find another aspect of trade law that he can use to categorize his tariffs. And not all of the tariffs have been imposed under these emergency powers. There are other bits of trade law, things to do with national security, that he may be able to dust off to keep these tariffs in place.
Let's talk about Donald Trump's pick for the new Fed governor. Of course, that will be pending the outcome of Lisa Cook and her case with President Trump to find out about her illegal firing, allegedly. He's testifying in front of a congressional committee today. But what can we expect from this? Is he going to get a bit of a grilling, do you think?
Oh, he really did. It's Stephen Myron, who is currently Donald Trump's chief economist. He faced the Senate Finance Committee today, and he did get a grilling, or at least from the Democrats on the committee. And it started out with Elizabeth Warren, who formerly has run for president, and she made it very clear that she did not believe that Myron could be independent of Trump. And she started her questioning by saying, okay, Dr. Myron, do you think that Donald Trump won the 2020 election? And she couldn't get a straight answer out of him. And her conclusion was that this man cannot be separated from Donald Trump. Other Democrats pointed out that Mr. Myron's appointment is only for a very short period of time. He's been appointed to fill the shoes of a governor called Adriana Kugler, who left quite abruptly. Her term was meant to end early next year, so this would only be a 4-month appointment. And a number of Democrats pointed out that Dr. Myron has pledged to take a leave of absence from his current role as the chief economist of the White House to fill that Fed role for a couple of months. And the conclusion that the Democrats came to was, if you don't do Donald Trump's bidding while you're at the Fed, how can you expect to walk back into your former job, which is being the chief economist for Donald Trump? And he really didn't have an answer for that, but it was really fascinating stuff. One thing we don't know quite yet is whether this confirmation process will be concluded before the Fed's next meeting, which starts on the 16th of September. Republicans in Congress would love to hurry this through. Whether they have the votes to do this is not entirely clear at the moment.
Surely this is one of the kind of the key messages that we've seen throughout this administration, is having as many fingers in as many pies as possible, politically speaking. And for Trump, this is the dream, to have one of his own on the inside.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Lisa Cook as well. It's not clear whether she's another Fed governor. There are 7 of them who vote on interest rates. It's not clear what will happen with her, although the mortgage official who initially accused her of some kind of mortgage fraud has said that he earlier today said he does think that she will be indicted. A criminal probe has been opened. We're not quite clear how this is going to play out, but it is concerning because there are 2 members of that 7 strong board of governors who have supported lower interest rates. The other 5 have voted with Chair Powell, but there is also 5 others who vote on interest rates. These are comprised of the heads of regional Federal Reserve banks, which are dotted across the country. Now, all of those presidents, their terms come up for renewal at the end of February next year. If Trump is able to get a majority on the Board of Governors, they can in turn pick friendly or essentially deny the appointments of independent-minded regional heads of Fed banks. It's a little complicated, but in short, it means that Donald Trump has a reasonable chance of putting a majority, of handpicking a majority of Fed governors, giving him control of interest rates. It's a little bit concerning.
Indeed, yet another busy day in Washington, but Laurie Laird there, and we mustn't leave it. Thank you so much for joining us.